Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 277. Today we are going to talk about clubs. This is a somewhat new release from North Star Games, and it is a sort of like a traditional card game. It says on the box here, if you like hearts and spades, you'll love clubs. And if hearts and spades are trick-taking games, then this is a ladder climbing game. And it is a very good, I'll just spoil a little bit here, sort of gateway into ladder climbing games. There's a lot of those like Tichu and Haggis. Haggis is probably my favorite. Some other ones, Frank Zoo, Big Two, Zhang Fen, there's a bunch. And this is very much a cool sort of intro game to that style of play, which from, kind of an American attitude, is my impression that a lot of families, they play spades, they play hearts. I played it a bunch growing up. So if you have a family that likes those kinds of games, this is definitely going to be a good pickup. So before I review too much more, let's take a look at how it works, and I'll come back and tell you why I like it. So here you can see everything that you're going to get in a box of clubs. You have one somewhat traditional deck of cards, and then you have another very much smaller deck of bonus point cards, all the way down to 0. So depending on the number of players, you'll set out a stack of these that players will get as they sort of go out of the round. So the object of the game is to run out of your hand of cards. So in a 3-player game, we'll have a 5, a 2, and a 0. And the first person to go out is, will grab the top card, second person to go out will get the 2, and then the 0 will go to the last person. But as you can see here, there's a little note at the bottom. Your clubs don't score this round, don't worry, you'll get them on the next round. So what does that mean? Well, if we take a look at the deck of cards here, you can see we have your traditional suits, hearts, diamonds, spades, all kinds of stuff. Now there's no face cards, just numbers. Now the clubs are worth points. So the higher numbered clubs aren't worth as many points, and then if we find, let's see, a lower number here, it's a 5, it's worth 3 points. If we find a really low number, this is a 4, it's worth 3 points. So what you're trying to do in the game is to go out, get the bonus points, but also as you're taking hands or taking tricks, you will get points for all the clubs that you've collected. So the game comes with kind of 2 different rules modes, and I've played with both, and I kind of like both equally now that I've played with them a few times each. There's crazy clubs, and then there is clubs. Now the rules say to play crazy clubs with a lesser amount of players, because the game does play 2 to 6, and in my opinion, my experience has been okay to play either style with different players. It just kind of breaks up the game a little bit, gives you something else to kind of chew on and different little strategic things you can try to do or try to guess at. So you're going to play the game over multiple hands, and basically the first person to 50 points is going to be the winner. You're going to deal out 10 cards to each player. And so what you're trying to do is lead these different sort of melds or tricks. And it works a little bit different than a normal trick-taking game. You're not always just playing one card and there's no trump, and you're not trying to out-trump or outscore the other player. What you're going to do is lead 2 different types of melds. So you can either lead kinds or runs. So if you're the start player, you're going to possibly lead kind. So what you might do is just play one card. That's one of a kind. It's a 1-4. And somebody else may come along and they'll play an 11. And then you play until everybody passes, then whoever played the last card collects, or if somebody plays a 15, at which point the trick will end. Now if somebody were to lead with a pair, then everybody would have to follow with pairs. So if somebody did a pair of 12s, the only thing that will beat that will be higher pairs. Again, you play till everybody passes, or somebody plays a pair of 15s. Now the rulebook gives several examples here, so you can see you could even do a 3 of a kind. So somebody does 3 5s, somebody else follows with 3 7s, 3 14s, and then 3 15s, which would kill it. The other type of thing you can do is runs. So if I led with a 5 and 6 sequential numbers, somebody else could follow that with a 7 and 8, 7 and 8, and then you could follow that with an 8 or 9 or a 12 and 13. And then again, it runs until somebody plays a run of 2 cards with a 15. Now that's kind of the normal clubs. The crazy clubs is a slight variation on that. Now you still have your kinds and you still have your runs, but you can play on top of lesser groupings. So let's say I played 11, and that was, so we're doing kinds. That's a 1 of a kind. Somebody comes along with a 13. Well, I can beat that with any pair or a 14 or 15. So if I come here and I do a pair of 12s, even though the face value is lower than that, it's a bigger group, so it's, you know, there's more 12, so I can do that. So now I can follow that with a pair of 13, 14, or 15, or I could come along with 3 of a kind. So like if I had 3 ones, I could beat that. So we just keep going in that way. And the same goes for a run. If I played a 12, 13, then of course you could beat it with a 13, 14 or 14, 15. But if I come along and then play 6, 7, 8, 9, well then I beat that, even though the end result is a lower face value. And then the first player to go out is going to take this. They're going to get 5 bonus points. Next player to go out takes 2. And then once there's only one person left, in this case in a 3-player game, this guy will take the 0, get no bonus points, and any clubs that they've collected through the course of that round are not going to count. Everybody else will add their club points to their bonus points. Now there's one very important rule which I love in this game. Before you've actually played a card, you can call double or nothing. So let's say, argument's sake, I don't know, somebody plays a 6 and it's your turn. You've got a higher card, but you don't feel like playing. You can pass. And then it goes around and somebody else plays a 9, and somebody plays a 13, and now it's back to you. And then you want to go in now. Now you want to jump in, because even though you passed, you can still get in on the current hand. So I say, okay, I'm going to play a pair of 8s to beat this single kind here. Well, before I play that, before I play my first set of cards, I can call double or nothing. So I play that, say double or nothing, and then I either get no points if I'm not the first person to go out. However, if I am the first person to go out, then I'm going to get double all of my points. So if you've got a really strong hand, or you need to play a little bit of catch up if somebody's got kind of a big lead on you, you can call double or nothing and really try to push the issue there. I really like that. It's a very simple bidding mechanic, which you can see in a lot of traditional trick-taking games, but it's very simple and straightforward, but it works really effectively. And then there's a couple of variants here in the rule book if you want to mix it up. You can play 2-player, you can play 15s or wild, which is pretty fun, and then you can also play in partners, and you just play to these different point scores there. So you can kind of mix and match this and play this with a variety of different types of groups, different settings, different player counts. It's going to work in a lot of situations. So that's pretty much how you play. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. There's a couple things I really like about this game. One I already mentioned, which was the double or nothing. It's a very simple, streamlined, you know, very, very simple mechanic of bidding. Or a lot of times, these kinds of games have sort of a complex bidding, or they have a bidding that you have to play a whole bunch to get to do it right, or else you screw everything up. So this is very simple, and it adds tension to a particular hand. If like maybe, you know, I call double or nothing, or 2 of us call double or nothing. And so that kind of dynamic will shift how players are playing, you know, for this hand, you know, based on, oh, he really needs to go out first, and, you know, oh, maybe I'll just collect clubs and let him worry about going out. So that's pretty interesting. The other thing is, it sounds really basic, is the 1 through 15 of clubs, and how the 15 doesn't give you really any points, and the 1 gives you a whole bunch of points. Just that idea, it's very simple. All the clubs give you a bunch of points. Instead of worrying about, like, you know, different combinations of cards, or just the odd cards, or whatever, you can easily sort of trick out or bait out other players and try to get their high value clubs, and you kind of hold those back. So that is pretty cool, because, you know, you have that principle in a lot of these other games, but not like with a whole suit, at least none that I've played. And so that's a pretty cool idea, and it's very simple and easy to grasp, but it introduces a basic sort of thing that you see in a lot of these ladder climbing games. So those 2 things are really cool, but then I guess there's a third thing. But then the fact that it plays 2 to 6 players is neat. Now, so let me take a step back here. My favorite of this style of game is Haggis, but it only plays 2 or 3 players. So it's a very niche game. Haggis has a lot more going on in terms of like the different sort of weavings that you can do with your hand, and different types of, you know, hands that you can play, and sets of cards. But it's like, again, it's only a 2 and 3 player, and it can be very brutal, and there's just a lot happening, and there's a lot of different combinations, so it's kind of a brain burner. This one's a little bit more relaxed because you've got such a big deck of cards, but because you don't deal out like the entire deck, or you have a smaller deck, you can still play this pretty good above 4 players. Now with 2 players, it's all right, but there's not enough that you can kind of count and stuff, and you can kind of guess what people have. But I've seen a 2-player game where somebody's like dealt like, oh, 1, 2, done, you know. But that's, I mean, whatever, it's cards. But you kind of lend yourself more to that with 2 players. I'd say it's okay with 2 players, but I would play it with 3, 4, and 5. I haven't played it with 6. And you still have interesting hands even with those different player counts, because other than, you know, I can't think of any good ladder climb game that plays more than 4. And, you know, games that support it, like Zeng Fen is one. I mean, you just don't play that with more than 4. You play with 3 or 4, and why would you play with more? You could, I guess. But then you're going to have, like, I have nothing in my hand that does anything interesting. So this kind of keeps that throughout the different player counts, so you can play the different variants, play partners, mix it up. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of basic things, but it really works on a nice level, and, you know, will be a nice gateway, I think, for folks that want a different kind of card game that doesn't use a normal deck of cards, slightly different style of deck, but it still feels very much like a normal deck of cards. So anyway, Clubs is going right here on the shelf because it's fun and it plays a variety of situations. I think that's the important part about it. You can play this 2-player if you really wanted to, but you can play it up to 6 as well. Where a lot of these other ladder climb games are, you know, they're very niche and very specific for a certain player count, even if they say they play more or less. So anyway, that's Clubs. Definitely take a look at it. Thanks.